here on This Morning. Now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Vice President Kashim Shettima on Thursday met with governors of the 36 states of the Federation and ministers to deliberate on a new minimum wage for workers in the country, as well as other economic matters. The President and the governors met at the 141st meeting of the National Economic Council, which took place in the council chamber of the State House in Abuja, the nation's capital. The Vice President chaired the meeting with state governors, as expected, deputy governors and ministers before the arrival of the President. So Thursday's meeting comes about 2 days after the Federal Executive Council stepped down a minimum wage review memo to allow for more consultations. So governors under the aegis of the Nigeria Governors Forum also met in Abuja on Wednesday, assuring Nigerians that ongoing negotiations between the government and private sector and organized labor would produce better wages. So we'll be talking about this by speaking with a political scientist, research associate, professor at the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies, University of Lagos, Kayode Esuola, who is joining me on the show. I hope I got the name right now.
Well, it's fine. Good morning.
Right. So
good morning, Nigeria.
Right. It does appear that there is no certain agreement yet, on what the new minimum wage would be following the outcome of the National Executive Economic Council meeting attended by all governors as well as the President. But we understand that the President approved a one-off allocation to states and the Federal Capital Territory of 10 billion naira for the procurement of buses and CNG uplift program as part of the National Construction and Household Support Program. So it's an intervention program which includes delivery of 50,000 naira uplift grants each to 100,000 families per state for 3 months. So, and then the provision of labor unions and civil society organizations. What's your reading of this issue surrounding the new national minimum wage, looking at what the government has done so far, the conversation, and where we are at currently?
Well, I've always said it that for any country that is productive and progressive, minimum wage is never seen in terms of naira and kobo, in terms of the currency, in terms of the volume of the currency. In other words, applied to us in Nigeria, it's not all about 30,000, 70,000. It's about the immanent and manifest realities within the economic situation, and that has always been my position. And so if the government is now coming out to say that for certain reasons, economic technicalities, inflation, and whatever, we should not go this way in terms of the volume of naira. However, we realize that what we are paying now in terms of naira cannot definitely be a living wage to anybody. Therefore, we must look elsewhere. Those elsewhere are what the government is trying to penetrate. How do you transport yourself to work? Do you have to take the naira completely from your 30,000 or 70,000 or 100,000, or there's something that will be subsidized, thereby creating employment in another sector and regenerating wealth rather than just putting cash in your pocket? Okay?
That's right.
Transportation, even food food subsidy, house subsidy, and all these things. We have always said the government needs to go into all this. And that is why, my brother, in some parts of the world where a good system exists, I'm not saying there's no good system in Nigeria, but we're still working on so many systems.
The ideal system.
The ideal. Well, maybe not ideal, because what's ideal to you might not be ideal.
Absolutely.
Good system that responds to the needs of the people. We have not arrived there yet. Maybe this is one of the steps that will take us there. What they do in such system is have a commission. You call it Salaries and Wages Commission or Minister, whatever nomenclature you give to it. And then what that commission does is study consistent. That's all they do. They don't do any other thing. Okay? You study consistently the trend of the economy. House rent, transportation costs, cost of acquiring property, car, houses, and you design by recommendation your wage system based on all this.
That's right.
And the logic is clear. Why do you pay wage to workers? You pay wage to workers because, one, they need to survive, and two, which for us in Nigeria should be more important, they need to take their jobs professionally well. Where you deviate, the result is obvious. They will not only find it difficult to survive, they will become unprofessional. That unprofessionalism explains why the policeman will be on the road and start asking for 5 naira instead of fighting crime. That non-professionalism explains why a teacher will be in school and rather than concentrating on writing notes, he probably or she will be selling bread or groundnut under the table.
Are you sort of making excuses for instance, the civil service, where they say there is large corruption, there, the issue of not just bureaucracy, red tapeism, but even corruption, and then ineptitude of the workers that we have in Nigeria. Although the head of the civil service, tried to defend the civil service, saying that we have, the best civil service, one of the best civil services in the world. But are you trying to make excuse, find an excuse for them for not doing? For some of them not doing their job the right way?
Well, it's a matter of semantics. You call it excuse, I call it explanation. It depends on how it strikes you. But let me paint a scenario to you. If you have in your house a housemaid, perhaps brought from the village, obviously deprived of basic things of life, what you notice is that when they come to your house, they begin to engage in funny things like stealing meat behind the door or taking gari and tying in rubber towards their bedroom. When you are curious about this, you compare to your own son, who you beg to eat meat. Junior, you must finish your food, otherwise I won't take you out for movie or something. Now you have a scenario of 2 kids, one behaving differently from the other. Now, when you want to explain, what you see is, on one hand, somebody who deprivation has forced to behave differently. And then on the other hand, you see another person who, appropriateness of resources has also conditioned to behave differently. If you put the logic on that analogy, if it makes sense to you, you will see that there is no human being who doesn't assume dignity. My brother, do you know what it means for a policeman to be on the road to say, Oga, give me 20 naira? It's an insult of his personality. He has pride too. He has dignity too. But by virtue of bad salary, bad income, that dignity has eroded over the years. And then it has now become a habit. The shame has now been removed. It becomes a mainstream situation. So I say, by this analysis, that the only and first way to stop corruption is first and foremost, give workers appropriate wages. When you do that, it does not mean automatically corruption will go away.
That's right.
But you see, it becomes something that will not make you ask the person who is corrupt, what are you going to do with the money? But for now, you cannot ask anybody.
but we can actually argue this, on and on, because we've had someone in the civil service who had stolen, 80 billion, 90 billion. You've heard of that story. So we wouldn't say someone at that cadre would need such amount of, wouldn't be paid well so as to have stolen.
The person will still explain to you.
Money.
Does that person have access to medical treatment? Do that person's children have access to good housing? Is it guaranteed that that man, in his old age, will have, from the Nigerian state, facilities that will support and sustain them?
So if the person wants to steal, so the person actually had to take up to 80 billion?
No. What is taken up to does not matter. what is critical in this situation is that you are explaining why it needs to be greedy.
Okay.
And then he wants to go and build house in Dubai, in the United States, and all this. How many Americans are stealing money to come and build houses in Nigeria?
You know, we can continue to debate that because we are not trying to make excuses or explain the reason why some people are corrupt, because that is what we want to stamp out of the system. But let's take it back to the issue of minimum wage. And I think I understand you very clearly. Recall that the Federal Executive Council took a decision to step down the memorandum on a new minimum wage. A reason given by the Minister of Information and National Retention that the President needs to further consult with the governors and also make wider consultation and even with the private sector before submitting the bill to the National Assembly. How reasonable do you consider this explanation? there I go, this explanation. Because some critics will say it's just a way of buying time. It's just, you know, delay tactics. Do you agree that?
It does appear to me that is exactly what is happening. There are things you don't need rocket science to explain. The first thing you need to ask anybody, even if you have never been to the gate of any school, is that in Nigeria as of today, the poorest person, by assumption, who will live in one-room apartment, okay, who has one wife, perhaps in a country with electricity crisis, will have one I beg my neighbor generator.
I better pass my neighbor.
I better pass my neighbor generator. How much does that person need to survive? Not invest in capital project, to just survive in 1 month. You get the answer. Government should reason that way to fix the minimum wage. That we're not even saying people are going into luxury, but we know that no Nigerian today can survive in 30 days without having up to 300,000. I know so. Because that man goes to hospital, sends children to school, is providing his own security, is providing his own electricity, and he pays for all this. And then he has to feed. A plate of rice now, however miserable in Nigeria, cannot give you, cannot cost you less than 1,000 naira. 1,000 in 3 places, that's 3,000. Multiplied by 30, you get 90,000. On feeding yourself alone. Wife, children, dependents, who ordinarily should have been taken care of by the Nigerian state. But we'll have to depend on you to say, Uncle, give me 5,000 naira to add to my wife fee.
It's a serious situation, because if you look at it, the president actually promised to, showed commitment that he actually wants to increase the minimum wage. But then Labour is asking for nothing less than 250,000 naira, while the federal government and state governors have offered 62,000 naira. In fact, some even said it shouldn't even be more than 60,000 naira if we want to talk about 62,000 naira. So what do you consider to be the fair or realistic minimum wage, considering the country's economic situation, the grim situation which you've painted?
The word minimum wage is losing popularity around the world. Because what is minimum is a function of
maybe we should use what the president used, living wage.
Living wage.
Right.
What I support is living wage. And I said in my analysis, that wage that makes you live. As a citizen of a country, you have the right. It's not a privilege. Nobody is doing you a favor. What makes you live as a citizen? And by my own estimation, under the current economic situation and reality, the figure of labor is much more appropriate. Far much more appropriate than the figure of the government.
In the real sense.
You can work it out now.
In the real sense.
I've just given you an example.
But governors are saying that they won't have up to that amount to pay. Should we go for, okay, this is the real, this is the ideal figure or amount?
Realistic, not
realistic. Okay,
realistic.
This is the realistic.
Except anyone to tell me it is not realistic.
Otherwise, okay. So, but then is it enough for us to say, let us agree 250,000 naira, even though they've beaten it down from 650 or 50?
Don't let us mix up the roles.
No, the thing is, the question I want to ask is it, do we consider the ability to pay? Because the governors are saying they don't have the ability to pay. And if they say, okay, fine, we will pay 250,000 naira, but we have to retrench, some hands. We have to retrench some workers. It's just like being in a catch-22 situation between the devil and the deep blue sea. What would you advise?
That is why there is negotiation. When you are negotiating with labor, you have two sides. One is an interest group. And that is the structure all over the world. An interest group does nothing but protect the interest only of their members. So to that extent, theoretically speaking, labor is not wrong at all. Government is the umpire, the regulator, the balancer of social forces and social situation. On the other hand, government also is not wrong by saying, this is what we have the capacity to pay. Okay? But there must be a middle line.
That's right.
And that middle line must raise a fundamental question. On whose behalf does government operate? If government operates for the purpose of commissioners who have to drive 15 cars and go to all those, we all know them, then government will say, we can't pay, we'll stretch before we pay you this. But if government will also ask the question and answer that, wait a minute, government should operate on behalf of the people, then the middle line should tilt towards the people. I don't see the whole of 36 governors in Nigeria as one, thinking the same way. They don't belong to the same political party. Even if they do, within the same political party, you have different sub-ideologies. I could be a governor that would say, wait a minute, what do I need 10 SUVs for? What do my commissioners need these luxuries for? I'd rather drive a Beetle and allow the workers in my state to earn this amount. If you have a governor like that, let us have them. But if we have another governor who feels the workers can go to hell, their roles are not important, pay them 25,000 naira, let the political class, political elite within my cabinet live in luxury. If you have a governor like that, let the governor also go so.
I do not
That's
think
the beauty of federalism.
Right, right. Well, that's supposition, but I do not think there is any governor in Nigeria today who would want to call the bluff of the workers, because governors actually need them, in the civil service. Without them, there is nothing.
What we have seen so far, what we have seen so far does not indicate.
But we know that there are some states that are currently not paying up to 30,000 naira, and we are, haggling with haggling about a price of 62,000 naira. 250,000 naira. So is it not a mirage at the end of the day?
I just answered you that if you say there is no governor who will want to call the bluff of the people, that does not agree with what is on ground in Nigeria today. In fact, for allowing people to be on the same salary for more than 7 years when the economic reality has changed so far is, in my view, a way of taking them for granted. So if you say there's no governor who is taking people for granted, I accept it within the context of what you're saying. But I'm saying that Nigerian governors should not think the same way. You must defend your own legacy. You must create your own, political personality. You must write your own history. Governors don't generate the same income. You don't have to pay the same salary. You should look at your love for your own people, if you do have one, or your hatred for your own people, again, if you do have one. And based on all this, and the socio-political peculiarities in your own state. That's the beauty of federalism. Implement your own policy. If I were a governor, I could come out today and say, wait a minute, I want to pay 600,000 naira as minimum wage. If I think it works with me that way, I will do it.
So it should be decentralized. It should not be a national.
We're a federal state. We're a federal state.
It should be each state determining its own.
We are a federal state, and that's what it should be. And then if you give, it's an aberration. The states produce the wealth that accrued to the federal government. How come the state will pay lesser than what the federal government is paying?
All right, let me tell
you.
Because of our time, I think we have about 2 minutes to go. But let me quickly tell you what President Tinubu said at the last meeting with the governors. He said that he urged them to work together to meet the needs of the citizens, stating that he was willing to provide the needed support to ensure that Nigerians were relieved of hardship and must be done in time because there is no time. So he said we must produce the food our people eat. There is nothing we are doing that is more important than producing high quality of food to buy and sell, create jobs. And then let me jump to him saying that how much support do you need from me? In what form? I'm prepared to provide it. So he's, in essence, telling them that.
So you can see a president who, by these words, has good love for his people.
That's right.
I think that should be put in action. That should be the philosophy upon which the governors and the different states will come out with the figures of minimum wage. Not only the figures, as I said at the beginning, but also other peculiarity, transportation,
That's
food
right.
security, enabling environment, road construction, facilities that will back up the naira that they have in their pocket, and then roll us amongst nations, you know, that are serious with the welfare.
So you're still maintaining that 250,000 naira should be...
No, I'm not recommending. I'm saying that based on the economic realities in Nigeria, 250,000 naira demanded by labor is very, very appropriate. And of course, government own, from what they are doing now, from the number of projects they have, the luxuries and everything, their figure is also realistic. But I'm not saying that there must be a middle ground. And that middle ground must be worked on the philosophy of who is the focus of governance, the people or the political elite? I leave the same story to those
so this is you throwing it back to, okay, you guys are in the, you know, sitting around the table. You just must agree on something.
They must agree on something.
As soon as possible.
And that agreement must reflect the philosophy of governance.
Absolutely.
On whose behalf does government exist?
Quite an interesting conversation, insightful conversation with you, a political scientist, research associate, professor at the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies, University of Lagos, Kayode Isuola. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you.
Yeah.